Hey there, Bear Club! At the Mama Bear Initiative, we explore how to protect ourselves so we can protect our cubs, the people who depend on us. Join us and get the confidence you need to stay safe, make good choices, and protect yourself and those you care about. Let's go!
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Mama Bear Initiative podcast. My name is Stephanie Dunham.
I'm Evelyn Mason.
I'm Rochelle Knapp.
We'd like to thank you for joining us today here on this beautiful Saturday. And we're going to talk about perception, what it is, what the problems are of misperception, and how to manage perception in a healthy way. So let's start with defining what is the basic definition of perception, Evelyn?
Yeah, so it's basically, there's information coming in. It could be through seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling. Information's coming in and I'm interpreting it a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're using the senses, we're using our brains, neural pathways to think about what that information means. A lot of times our brains are taking in, I wouldn't say a lot of the time, all of the time.
All the time, yes.
Our senses are taking in information. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. We're constantly inundated with information from our environment, but not all of it needs to be paid attention to.
Right, so I think it's more of what are we aware of? What is coming to our minds? What has made it through the filter enough that it makes us go, okay, what?
Right. Right. And our brains, based on neural pathways, are taking that information and alerting us to its presence. But oftentimes that information comes to us in a particular way that may or may not be good. It may be bad. It may be indifferent. Like if we have a smell of smoke, for example,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
that's not a normal smell around here. So if I were to smell smoke, my nose would take it in. My brain would go, hey, smoke,
Right.
fire, danger.
Yeah.
Danger.
Yeah. So, the perception is that there's probably danger around.
Yeah. Why
Right.
is this here? Because it's not the usual thing.
Right. It's not the usual thing. So, that kind of interpretation is fine. I don't have a problem with that.
Right.
Right. It's healthy, if anything.
Yeah. It's kind of a higher level of interpretation that we're talking about, like mainly talking about people's behavior.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That we're going to focus on. So, oftentimes we see things going on and we make judgments about it.
Mm-hmm.
Snap judgments usually
Right.
about what we think is happening.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we act on it. Have you guys ever been like in a crowd somewhere where there's like a lot of people you knew and somebody's walking by and they're waving in your direction, but they're not looking directly at you?
Yes.
Yes.
Or it seems like they're looking directly at you and you wave back and then you realize,
Yeah.
Ever the person behind you?
Yes. Yes. And you're just like, oh, okay.
yeah. It feels a little silly at the time, but it happens to people all the time. But that's kind of what we're talking about, like a misinterpretation
Right.
of someone's behavior. We think they're
Yeah.
waving at us. We didn't realize there was somebody behind us that they were actually waving at.
Right.
And since it didn't seem like you connected with the person that was waving,
Mm-hmm.
you suddenly realize, oh, that wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Right.
And the whole time you're like, where do I know this person from? Why are they looking at me? Why are they waving? I'm just going to wave back and smile.
Yeah.
And I've had that happen where the person looked at me a little funny, like, why are you waving at me?
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah,
just
yeah.
in that moment, I go, okay, well, I guess I was needlessly friendly. Sorry.
Needless. Is there such thing as needless friendliness? I don't know, maybe.
Apparently, I just said it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
Well,
But yeah, that idea of misperception, though, it happens
Yeah.
a lot.
I've had the opposite happen where people come in to my store and they know me from before and I don't remember them at all.
You don't recognize them.
Like,
yeah.
Sure, okay, I don't know who you are, but okay.
Right.
And I feel really awkward then
You're
too.
misinterpreting what they're doing as, who is this person?
Right.
They're a threat. Yeah. I mean, I feel like perception is a really good skill,
Right.
but it has to be used correctly. Like, I have like severe anxiety from trauma, so I'm frequently misinterpreting what's going on, and it's running through various filters in my brain where, you know, I feel like there's a threat coming of some kind.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have to like really work at trying to apply reality to the situation and trying to explain to myself what could be going on, even though my initial interpretation is threat.
Right.
Right.
Something bad's going to happen. You know, and I realized that I have a lot of misperceptions based on just having anxiety.
Yeah. And just thinking about how that could apply to basically all of us, that we all have filters we put things through. So we can say, okay, you know, she's saying something in a certain way. And whether or not we're conscious of it, the mind goes, well, back when you were in first grade, your first grade teacher said something very much like that, same tone of voice. You got in trouble. Something bad is happening here. And if we don't learn to question our filters, we can make all kinds of, you know, wrong assumptions.
Yeah, so we're talking about misperceptions. I'd say at least 50% of the time, people have misperceptions
Yeah, definitely.
about what they think is going on.
Right.
Like I've had, you know, been at church or something, and somebody who's normally friendly greet me, but in a way that felt like they were upset with me.
Right.
But if I asked them later, they weren't really upset with me. They were just having a bad day.
Right. Had absolutely nothing to do with you, which I do that a lot.
Yeah, and that's a misperception on my part. I'm making an assumption based on my previous experiences, like Evelyn was talking about.
Yeah.
I've created a bias, probably against myself, where I'm the cause of trouble in everyone's life,
Yeah.
which is a trauma thing.
Yeah. And you start to see evidence of it everywhere.
Yes.
Even though there it is again, the perception may be completely off. You're like, well, yeah, she looked at me like that.
Yeah.
Or he looked, you know, he said that thing and it's bad.
Right. So, you know, like you were saying, Evelyn, if somebody treated you a certain way at a certain point in your life and it turned out badly, this creates a bias within yourself
Right.
about that kind of person, or, you know, it could be males, it could be females, it could be races, it could be professions, it could be anything.
Yeah.
Different types of authority. You know, we create these biases. Biases are created for safety. I'm not saying they're good or bad. I'm just saying that they exist because of safety.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, you know, tribe A always attacks tribe B. Therefore, tribe B hates tribe A and teaches their children to hate tribe A.
Yes.
And the children grow up and teach their children that, and they maintain this bias because at some point in their history, tribe A was always attacking tribe B. What if tribe A ended up stopping that behavior?
Right.
Yeah.
And the next generation decided not to do that anymore. Well, tribe B still hates tribe A.
Right.
Yeah.
It becomes so entrenched. And I think it can become so much a part of our identity that we don't even realize it's there.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, it's just the way things are. You could say, even though, yeah, but it's twisted. You're not actually seeing reality. You're seeing a twisted version of reality that you assume is true because it's always been true, right? It's gone on for generations.
Yeah. Like recently, I got into a conversation online with somebody I've known for 25 years about one of those hot button issues. And I had a different point of view than this person. And during the course of the online conversation, this person said, "Who told you to be angry about this thing?" I'm like, why do you assume I'm angry?
Right.
He goes, well, all the news agencies of X kind are telling you to be angry. And I'm like, how dare you assume
There's
Right.
there's
that
assumption.
he is, this person had created a bias against people like me based on his own perceptions of what he thinks is going on.
Right.
Therefore, I was subjected to his biases, and, things happened as they happened.
Right.
Yeah.
And, bias is it's a human problem. It's an ongoing problem. It's there. I think at its most basic level, when it comes to survival, it might be a good thing if you're biased against tigers or sharks.
At least in a healthy respect.
Yes, I said
I'm
sharks,
not going to
Rochelle.
mess with. Rochelle is rather fond of sharks.
Yes,
It's
we have a
true.
whole joke about sharks that we did not play for you guys when it comes to Rochelle. Rochelle's definitely not biased against sharks.
But she does have a healthy respect
Definitely.
of them.
I'll definitely keep my distance.
and admire them from afar. Yes.
Right. So, how we interpret things like Romeo and Juliet, classic,
Ah, yes.
bias-based, tragedy,
Yes. Unneeded tragedy at that.
completely unnecessary death and dying, fighting, and everything that went on,
Right.
but totally based on misperceptions.
Right.
Yeah.
The two families hated each other for some reason. I don't remember
Didn't
what the...
know why.
Yeah, it had gone on for so long.
Right. So, one of the major problems with misperception is not being willing to question why you have this bias or perception to begin with.
Right.
Like, where did it come from?
Yeah. I mean, you have one generation, say, of people who have a certain bias and they pass it on to their children. And their children might start to wonder, why do we have this bias? Whatever happened way back when isn't really relevant now. So why are we still believing in this thing that was
Right.
caused by a major misperception?
Yeah.
Right.
But the idea of not even questioning it, I think a lot of us have to learn. I mean, I know I've had to learn to be much more self-aware. Instead of just believing my own thoughts, just carte blanche, I believe it, it's true. Go, well, why do I believe that? Kind of like you were saying, Rochelle, but taking that idea of not so much why does my family believe that, but why do I believe that?
Right.
Why do I assume that this is true? To really develop that self-awareness, that's a lot of hard work. And how many people are willing to do that?
Right.
I don't think there's a lot of people because you have to stick your neck out when you go against the norm, what's become the norm based on misperception.
Right.
If you are the person that stands up and says, this is wrong, then you're standing out to everybody else. And that can be dangerous and
Yeah.
scary.
I mean, families have broken up over this sort of thing, where someone finally says, you know what, this isn't right. The way we've been perceiving others, or the way things we believe about ourselves, we need to stop this. And I mean, people have been ostracized from their own families for such things. It's sad.
Something that keeps coming to mind for me about perception is things like narcissism.
Yeah.
True narcissists, diagnosable narcissists, tend to believe that they're perfect,
Right.
even though their behavior is based in like severe lack of self-worth,
Yeah.
right? But they come off as, or they believe that they're superior in some way.
Yeah. They can't be corrected.
Right. And that misperception creates a problem for everyone else around them. Because I feel like people can misperceive their own personalities or their own thoughts. Like, one major problem I've been seeing lately is like people defining what's true. Like, there's objective truth, there's subjective truth, there's personal truth, there's all kinds of truth, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like there's some swapping of subjective and objective truth that's going on in a lot of different ways. And people basing their perceptions on subjective truth rather than objective truth. Like, what is the standard of behavior? Like, everybody should know that murdering is wrong.
Right.
But what if somebody takes that and misperceives some aspect of that, and murder then becomes okay?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that people talk about, that they've, I'm sure you can think of some hot button issues where somebody will say it's murder, somebody else will define it differently. I remember back, oh gosh, it probably was happening before this, but I remember in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, when I was in college, and that whole idea of truth being subjective. I remember a professor saying there is no ultimate truth. And I remember thinking, you just made an ultimate truth statement there.
Yeah, his perception about reality is based on his misperception of reality.
But here we are, like 30 years later, my truth, your truth. If it's true for me, it's true. And now you need to believe it's true, or else I'm going to get mad at you.
Right.
So this whole perception, like you were saying, is there ends up being this weird swapping. And if there's not this ultimate truth, some objective truth to put to be a foundation, then how can you say anything is true?
Right. We'd like to thank you for joining us on this episode today. We'd just like to remind you that we are on social media. We're on Twitter, it's X, formerly known as Twitter. We're on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook. Yeah, I think I got them all in.
I think so.
We're putting in, clips of the upcoming episode. We're putting in reels about self-defense things. We have a website, kintsugicompany.com. That's KINTSUGI.com, where you can go and find our episodes. You can also find links to either give us a coffee, donate some money. It's not tax deductible. Or you could join our Patreon and receive some benefits, although we haven't really gotten anybody on Patreon just yet. We're still working on that. Anyways, and lastly, just share the episode. Share the episodes, share the reels, share the clips, spread the word. If you like what we're doing, why not share the love? And now back to the episode. All right. So we are going to finish up the last bit here. We've talked about what we mean by perception, and we've talked about the problems of misperception. Let's now talk about managing perceptions in a healthy way, because, a lot of misperceptions get people into a lot of trouble.
That's true.
Whatever trouble means for that person in that moment.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I think my favorite self-defense attitude is self-control.
Yeah, that's a good one, an important one.
Yeah, and what do I mean by self-control?
The way I look at it is, you're not rushing into anything. You're holding back. You're waiting, which is difficult for a lot of us to do, myself included.
Yeah.
But you're waiting. You're observing the situation to see what happens, to see if your perception is correct.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, especially those of us on the ADD spectrum, tend to have this tendency to become impulsive. I perceive something, I just want to act. And there's this urge to act, and just being able to pull that in. Okay, just wait, take a deep breath, and just take a moment to assess. I think that's some pretty good self-control.
Yeah, it's basically just not giving in to whatever emotion comes up at the time.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm a bit of a hothead, which I may have mentioned before.
You?
I don't know.
She controls it well.
I do have a good bit of self-control, But there was a time where, someone would look at me cross-eyed and be like, get the hell out of my face,
Yeah.
yelling at whomever, whatever I was perceiving a threat or perceiving an injustice or whatever. And I'd be like yelling back.
Yeah. And there it is, that self-defense kind of thing, self-protection, but not a healthy one.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Now, training in self-defense gives you a chance to correctly perceive, or at least moderately correctly perceive
Yeah.
what's going on. Yes, because you don't really know
Right.
exactly, but you know what to watch out for. That's an actual threat.
Yeah.
So that you can respond appropriately.
Right.
Right. And not just like a trauma response, self-protection,
Right.
but an actual reasoned and responsible response.
Yeah, responsibility. That's a huge
Right.
thing when it comes to perception. Like, you're responsible for how you respond.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you really have to make a choice, especially if your perception was incorrect. You have to make a choice to respond correctly, and not a lot of people do that. They will respond however they respond. It doesn't matter what they perceive, if it's right or not.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to that not questioning the way I'm perceiving things, just assuming because I feel this way, I think this way, it's true, and so I act accordingly.
Right.
But yeah, often we're wrong.
Very, very, at least 50% of the time. At least 50% of the time we're wrong about, if we go back to so-and-so was waving in my direction, but not at me, but it looked that way. And I waved back, and now I feel silly because it wasn't for me. That's a very, very mild example of, like, I remember one night I was training with someone who I guess is an expert in self-defense or something. I don't really know the person's background, but they seemed to know what they were talking about. And so they were training me and this other person how to deal with someone walking up to you at a gas pump.
Okay.
And, you don't know why that person's coming to you. Like, I think the prevailing perception of homeless people right now is that they're either on drugs, mentally unstable, or out to get you in some way, like steal from you.
Right. Yeah.
So, if someone comes up to you who looks homeless at a gas pump or whatever, the immediate response is, get away from me.
Right.
Right. Immediately people are, afraid of it.
Yes.
Afraid of the person.
Yeah.
And, the guy that was training us you don't really know what's going on. You want to manage what they're doing and keep them away from you, but you can also just be human and talk to the person and find out what, and there's certain signs that they're really trying to scam you. And there's other signs that they really are in need of help.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just automatically assuming worst case scenario, well, that's not wise either. So going to extremes, it's just not wise either way.
Right. And the biases, that people have about different kinds of people, homeless people in this case, will color how you perceive what's going on.
Right.
So I think somebody mentioned this already, but I'm just going to bring it up again. Patience, like waiting it out. And that, going back to that training I was just talking about, we were encouraged to be patient enough to find out through conversation what was really happening for that person, why they were approaching you. It doesn't automatically mean that someone's being a threat if they're coming up to you anywhere in public.
Yeah.
It just means that something is happening, but we just don't know what.
Yeah. I think the automatic alert in your mind can sometimes be very difficult to overcome, because being human is a good response, but that alarm in your mind, like, I need to get away from this person, can be overwhelming for people, and they can start acting paranoid.
Yeah.
And kind of freak out if someone's approaching them, and just automatically, like, blanket react that way to everybody that approaches them because that's what they're perceiving.
Right.
So
Yeah.
letting that alarm sort of sound and be alert, but don't be like screaming, running away, or at least running away from them
Yeah.
with paranoia, finding that balance between, okay, I should be cautious, but let me see what they want. That
Yeah.
can be hard to do.
And I think that patience gives you space to do that. It kind of slows things down a little so you can do a correct assessment.
Right. And I think you talked about this, Evelyn. There's a difference between someone coming at you with a knife and someone just walking up to you with their hands
Right,
open.
right.
I mean, you can
Yeah.
perceive someone coming at you with a knife as an actual threat. Because that's a threat.
That's valid. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a valid threat.
Valid threat.
That's
That's just
objectively true that they're trying to attack you.
Yes.
So
Or be threatening at the very least.
there's really
Right.
nothing to interpret, really.
Right.
And that's really when you have to act quickly, be prepared to act quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
But someone just approaching you, hands out of their pockets, open, they may or may not be a threat. We don't know.
Yeah. And it may be an opportunity to connect with somebody. I mean, not every person walking your way is someone to shun or avoid, or, sometimes it's just two humans being human.
Yeah.
It's good to find out, if that's what's going on or what's going on as much as we're able.
I think we have to consider time of day too, especially if you're outside in a parking lot and you're unprotected and it's late at night. There's a likelier chance of something bad happening. Not to say that it would with the person, but it's higher possibility, and you have to be careful. I think the alert should be higher at that point, and you should move
yeah.
yourself into some sort of protective area. Like, say you're at a gas station, you say, if you want to talk to me, why don't we go inside the store? That way you're in a well-lit area with at least one other person present. Because that way
Yeah.
you're safer. If they're just being human, then you're fine. But if they have something up their sleeve, then getting into a safe place is the right thing to do in that case.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like, one of the things we didn't list that I feel like would be good to mention is if you find that you're frequently misinterpreting or misperceiving what's going on around you, like you see something, you experience something, and then later you ask about it, you find out, no, that's not what I thought or felt at all.
Yeah.
If that's a frequent problem for you, you probably need some therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get curious about, how did I get here?
Right. Because you may have had something happen to you you're not even aware of that is creating all these biases
Right.
Yeah.
inside of you that is not helpful
Right.
to you.
I mean, it really does come around to self-awareness again. And I think in a lot of our podcasts, a lot of our topics, it does come to that, what's going on inside of me?
Right.
Why do I think this way? And that's something, I think that we can all really benefit from working on, is, being more aware of why we believe the way we do.
Right. Which leads us with the last point of managing perception in a healthy way, which is humility.
Yeah.
Which is what, Rochelle?
Humility is not reacting in a superior way, but thinking about the other person as a human being, being a little softer, a little kinder, depending on the situation, how much alert you should have or caution you should have, but not coming at them like angry with no room for interpretation at all. Mm-hmm. Just basically the opposite of that, just being humble and kind to them as much as you can be without compromising your own safety.
Yeah. And the whole thing with self-awareness, again, is I'm not going to assume I'm right. I'm not going to assume just because I think it's true. Mm-hmm. But to go, I could very well be wrong. And as Steph has mentioned at least twice, about 50% of the time, we're going to be wrong as we're trying to perceive what's happening.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, again, we've talked about what perception is. It's interpretation of incoming data,
Yep.
typically about what other people are doing or saying. Problems of misperception have to do with assumptions and biases and not being willing to question our own interpretations. Finally, we talked about managing perception. Like, what do we do? We're feeling and thinking a certain way.
Yeah.
We have to have some patience, some self-control, and some humility.
Yep.
Yeah. Pretty
So-
well sums it up.
I think we pretty much got where we wanted to go, and right on time.
Ah, well done, us.
Yeah.
We're so glad you guys stuck along or hung out with us for the ride.
Yeah, totally. So we'd like to thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you listening to our podcast. We hope you learned something. Share this podcast with someone you care about. If you want them to learn about perception the way you did to what we had to say, feel free to share it with other people.
And please follow us and write a review. It really helps us out.
Yeah, and we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts currently, which by itself is something to manage.
Yeah, we look forward to hearing from you. So, feel free to drop us some comments and, wherever you happen to hear this. And we'd love to hear from you and connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Have a great day.
See you next time.
Bye. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks so much for joining us as we discussed such an important topic. We hope you got some food for thought and encouragement to keep going and keep growing. See you later, Bear Club.
Remember to join the Bear Club on our Patreon page for exclusive content. The link is in the description. You can find our podcast on Google, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.